This is Pat's Probe as we put an end to the 2020 season for the New England Patriots, and most importantly, take an early look ahead at the offseason. And a big offseason it will be for the Patriot franchise. Fifth overall, I believe, in salary cap space. The 15th pick of the first round. 10 picks in all in the 2021 NFL Draft. As I welcome in Evan Lazar from CLNSmedia.com. Evan, the season's over. Fans of both the Jets and Patriots couldn't care really less of what happened in that final game. For both franchises, it's off to the offseason. And I guess the number one question really that still is in the back of Patriot fans, or I would guess is in the back of Patriots fans' minds more than anything, is the quarterback position. And has anything happened since the last time we spoke last week?
Not really. There was a report on Sunday morning from Adam Schefter, a report that wasn't a report, I guess. It was more informed opinion, I suppose, from Schefter, because he took a little bit offense to people calling it a report that the Patriots and Cam Newton were going to part ways at the end of the year. I don't think that that's definitely a foregone conclusion yet. But it does feel like if the Patriots are going to be serious about starting this rebuild and turning the page, that they need to be aggressively pursuing an upgrade at the quarterback position, and not just an immediate upgrade in terms of what they would bring to the table in 2021, but just somebody that has a long-term future potentially in New England. Because even if you count on Cam for 2021, I mean, how many years do you really think that he is going to have left at playing at any sort of starting caliber level? Not that I even think he was at starting caliber this season, but if you look into next season and you think, okay, they add a bunch of weapons around him, they go out and they add a receiver or a tight end or two, and maybe, with a better supporting cast, Cam can come in here and perform better. I think that there is a world where that equation is not that crazy, but at the same time there really doesn't feel like any future with Cam. In the present, he's a 7-9 quarterback. It just doesn't seem like this marriage is meant for the long term.
Okay, so between the now and the next time we talk, which will be at some point just before free agency kicks off, what would first of all, if Cam Newton does return, when do you think we're going to know?
I would say that it's probably going to be another strung out free agency process, because I can't imagine, and I could be totally wrong, but just based off of what I know, I can't imagine that the Patriots are viewing Cam Newton as plan A.
Oh, no,
Right?
no. And I wouldn't think so either. That would be ludicrous. So,
Right.
so if he is but let's say he's plan A backup.
Sure.
Could they still work that out early in the process?
It's possible. I think that it's really, once we get to the combine, we might have a better feel for exactly what the landscape is going to look like at the quarterback position. But mainly, I think that they were looking at Cam as sort of a backup plan, last resort sort of thing. And then I think also on top of that, it does matter a little bit, to me at least, who they bring in. If it's a young guy, especially, what kind of style of player is that young quarterback, right? Is that young quarterback a Mac Jones, who's a stationary pocket passer that doesn't have a ton of athleticism, or is that quarterback Trey Lance or Desmond Ryder or someone like that,
who's like Cam Newton,
who's going to who's going to do a lot of the same things that Cam does? I don't know what is really to gain from going into next season with Cam Newton and Mac Jones when Cam Newton's running QB sweep and Mac Jones is running, 5 watts.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem to add up to me.
Okay. So what you're saying is no matter what, you think that it's quite possible that we won't know about Cam Newton's status early on in the free agency period.
I think it's very possible. I think that this could be a situation not as drastic as last year when he didn't sign it until July, but maybe right after the draft once the Patriots get a nice kind of setup of what their quarterback position is going to look like outside of Cam Newton.
And over the past week, the fact that he started, I guess the one thing we did learn for sure about Newton starting the last couple of weeks, especially last week, was the Patriots have no plans for Jarrett Stidham moving forward.
Correct. I think the Jared Stidham thing, I tweeted this out after the game on Sunday night between the Redskins and the Washington football team and the Eagles. And Jared Stidham to me is Nate Sudfeld, right? He's the guy that is not a future starter. Maybe he's your future backup plan, your actual career backup, not your backup plan to be the starter, but somebody like a Brian Hoyer, for example, right? That you just like enough to keep him on the as a backup quarterback. He is not a quarterback that they're going to look to as in terms of the future, in terms of having starter upside, anything like that. And I think any sort of narrative that comes out of Gillette or comes out of Bill Belichick's mouth that suggests that they think higher on Jared Stidham right now at this point is really just trade fodder, them just trying to drive up any sort of market for him. I think that he's at best a career backup at this point for New England. And the reason why I truly think that they started Cam now at this point, now that we've seen sort of the reactions post game the last couple of days from the win over the Jets, I think it meant a lot to Cam to start all 16 games in the season. And I think that Belichick felt like Cam put in all of the work. He was there early mornings, there till late at night. He did everything he possibly could have to have a good season. It just didn't work out. I think Belichick sort of felt like he was doing the right thing and doing his starting quarterback a solid by letting Cam finish out the season, even if they weren't going to be in playoff contention, and even if they might have beaten the Jets because Cam Newton was at quarterback and not Jared Stidham, and lost a couple of slots in the draft process. And the result, they could have picked 12th. They're picking 15th instead because they beat the Jets.
That could have happened, huh?
So, yeah. So some of that
fans shouldn't be happy.
Fans might not be thrilled about it. I think that there is a message that you send to the locker room, though, when you stand by a guy that's done everything correct all year long. And to me, that's mostly what this is about.
Okay. I'm thinking about a lot of those players, though, that have done even more than Cam. And when it came time to sign those guys, the Patriots didn't sign them. But maybe that's something a little bit different. It is a financial situation. So I can look at it both ways.
Situation, obviously the Patriots have moved on from guys. Ty Law, Richard Seymour, probably the biggest names. Lawyer Malloy, back in the early 2000s. Recently, Kyle Van Noy didn't get in the contract here. Chandler Jones got traded. Malcolm Butler didn't get a contract from the Patriots. All those things are true. So once you get to the money portion of it and you sit down at the negotiation table, that's a different ball game, right?
Sure.
I think when you look at the veterans in the locker room and you say, oh, okay, are we giving these guys the best chance to win? Are we doing what's right by all these players that have worked their tails off for us this year? Again, it reminded me a whole lot of what the Eagles pulled on Sunday Night Football against Washington this past week, where Nate Sudfeld was clearly not the best option to win that football game, but they did it in sort of an eye to the future type of way. And I think that you do risk losing guys that way.
All right. Now, by the way, I'm going to go ahead and pop up a snapshot on this template here. I've got the Ourlads current depth chart page for the Patriots. So we'll talk about that. And obviously, you go to ourlads.com to check out the depth chart on a daily basis for the Patriots. And that's going to change an awful lot between now and the draft. So that's why Dan Shanka is kept very busy once the playoffs are over, and there's it's been a very busy regular season with all the crazy transactions, and if you look at the reserve list of the Patriots on here on this depth chart page, it's just crazy. And being a Browns fan and hearing that your head coach is not going to be able to coach the playoff game, which is why I said last week on a couple of shows, and I'm just going to keep saying it every week until the Super Bowl, there's a big asterisk in the NFL season. I don't care what anybody says. It just is. I mean, look, now I don't know if the Patriots, if the Dolphins can come back and beat the Bills with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Maybe they can. I don't know. But there's no doubt Ryan Fitzpatrick's playing in that game, the way it started, the way Tua looked. And if Fitzpatrick plays and let's say Miami wins, that changes who's in the playoffs and who's not. And now you got the Cleveland Browns. They can't have their coach in the playoff game. So I don't want to hear what anybody says. Whoever wins it, they're going to say, oh, No asterisk, my team won it. But let's be real. We all know that whoever wins the NFL season this season, it's one of those things that you're just going to have to live with. But that's okay. You win the championship. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I definitely feel like from a Patriot perspective, it's hard not to at least use some of the COVID excuse, right? Obviously, they were a team that was 2-1 pre-COVID outbreak in New
That's
England.
true too.
Cam
Yes.
looked Cam looked pretty decent in the first couple of weeks of the season, especially in weeks 1 and 2. He had the week 1 opener against Miami where he ran all over the Dolphins, and then in week 2 he threw all over Seattle in that last second loss. His mechanics were looking a lot
Yes.
better. His
Just turn on the
timing with the
highlights. Look
offense.
at the film of the Seattle game for Cam, and then take a look
Right.
at him after COVID, and you're like, this isn't the same guy.
Yeah, and then the wheels fell off, and it just never felt like they could get the train back on the tracks after that point, because there was a 3-week period there where Cam was not in the facility. He wasn't practicing with the team. He wasn't practicing with the coaching staff, and it definitely altered the season pretty drastically for New England. And then also you add in there the opt-outs that they did have coming into the year: Dante Hightower and Patrick Chung and Marcus Cannon, 3 starters right there, with Hightower being one of, probably their biggest impact player in the front seven defensively, a guy that they were really, really counting on to make a big impact in their defense. They lose him. It wasn't a great football team this year in New England, but they still went 7-9 with all of that adversity thrown in there. And you have to think, if there is no COVID outbreak, if Dante Hightower suits up for them this year, a 7-9 football team easily could have become a 10-6 and 11-5 team, and we could be talking about a totally different season.
And look, I think if I'm a Patriot fan, I'm looking at, hey, if we're going to pick a season where things aren't going to go well, we're not going to make the playoffs, this is the perfect season for it, because there is an asterisk next to it. I mean, I wouldn't want to be one of those really good teams that wins. What's that?
It does set them up really nicely for next year too, because of the salary cap situation, and they're one of the few teams that has a ton of cap space, and yeah, they're in a great position right now in terms of the offseason rebuild.
Yeah, 10 picks. I think the top additional pick is the compensation for Brady. That's in the where is that in the third?
It'd be the third round. It's the top comp pick of the entire formula, so it'd be something like 92nd overall or something like that.
Does that mean it's the beginning of the third round?
It's towards the end of the third round.
So it's the last pick of the third round. Well, the 33rd pick.
Right.
Okay.
But they have, they'll have, I think, 8 comp picks from that point on in the third round. So they're the top. It's the 33rd pick instead of, the 40th pick or something like that.
Okay. And again, like you mentioned, they're 5th in cap space. So there's a lot of money to spend. And this is something we've talked about over the last few weeks, because this is a Patriot team that just doesn't usually spend a lot of money. And if they do, on top free agents, but if they do, it's normally to win championships. So, boy, it's going to be interesting to see exactly what road they go down. Is there and again, because we're not going to talk for a little while, give me a tipping point where something happens to a specific player, and that's the sign that it's going to go one of two ways. Complete rebuild, or we're doing this where we're going to go for it, where we're going to try to make a deal to get Matthew Stafford or whoever. What's the first tipping point?
Stefan Gilmore. If they deal Stefan Gilmore at the start of free agency, then that Bill Belichick is going for a long-term rebuild. And Gilmore is in a contract year in 2021. He wants another contract extension before he hangs it up football-wise. He's going to be 31 years old in September of 2021. We talked about this last week. It's the Revis situation all over again for New England, or the Aqib Talib situation all over again, where you paid the guy in his prime. He gave you a prime 4 years here in New England for Stefan, Defensive Player of the Year, 2-time All-Pro, fantastic player, and a fantastic signing by Bill Belichick. Now comes the time where that second contract with New England becomes a little bit murky, and the Patriots are not typically one of those teams that forks over the second deal, because usually that the player is getting rewarded for past performance and not necessarily future performance. So the Patriots are always looking at future performance. If they want there is a possibility that if they do things correctly this offseason, they have all the money in the world, they have all the draft assets in the world to really fill all of these holes that they have on their roster with good players, with in certain circumstances, premium players. You know, they can go out and they can sign a Hunter Henry. They can go out and they can sign a legitimate edge rusher to help their front seven. They can do all these types of things. The question really is does Bill Belichick look at this as, let's restart a window here? You know, let's throw the kitchen sink at all of our problems this offseason and go for it again next year? Or does he actually really want to build this thing out for a long-term rebuild where maybe it might take 3 to 5 years, but hopefully at the end of the rainbow, they're relevant for another decade after that? I don't know which way they want to go. Belichick's 68 years old.
Sure.
Something tells me that maybe he would prefer to create a 3 to 5 year window for himself to go after another Super Bowl versus looking at the long term. And if he's going to do that, then you keep Gilmore, you just pay some of these guys in free agency to come in here and help you right away. And then obviously you look to the draft for your future long term needs at quarterback, maybe a premier pass catcher or something like that.
Yeah, and I would have to think, to tell you the truth, I think it's more like it's more like 3 years. I think if you could go to 5, then we're definitely talking rebuild, because I don't think the Patriots, we've already seen one class of, basically, if you're talking rebuild, they've already done that with the last year's class. So I think they've already got a jump start with some of the players, some of the young talent that could be described as rebuild talent. So I think that 3 years is a logical, if it's a quick fix. I think a quick fix could be 2 to 3 years. I think a rebuild is 3 to 5 years. I don't think rebuilds anymore, if you're smart and you already have a decent foundation, which the Patriots already have, I don't think it takes that long.
That's why I'm leaning towards them going all out style of this offseason, is because with Bill Belichick in the building, the fact that this team with this roster made it to 7-9, you add a couple of pieces here or there. Maybe you make a upgrade at the quarterback position, and I'm not even talking about getting a Matthew Stafford or a Matt Ryan.
Well, what are you talking about then?
Just somebody, a reasonable upgrade. Okay. Somebody in the draft.
Oh, so you're still taking into the draft?
I would say I still would like to see them invest a high asset in a draft pick for looking towards the long term, for sure. I think in the short term, we're sort of in this territory of murkiness, because really I think the highest upside in this offense is probably somebody that's been here before, like a Jimmy Garoppolo or a Jacoby Brissett. Cam Newton coming back, I think, is not out of the realm of possibilities either. But I don't know if you're winning a Super Bowl with any of those guys, and I don't think that any of the veteran quarterbacks, that if they could trade for a guy like Stafford, then we're talking about this team competing for a Super Bowl as soon as next year with the other assets that they have. But that's, I don't think, going to happen. So the pairing that I put down on paper for today was Jacoby Brissett and Mac Jones from Alabama. I like that pairing just from a stylistic standpoint. I think Jacoby Brissett had some moments in 2019 with Indianapolis. He's sort of the season starter until Mac Jones is ready. I think Mac Jones is the type of guy that they would really like. Yeah.
And Brissett, he's unrestricted?
Correct. He's an unrestricted free agent. He's not going to be too expensive. I think at this stage of their careers, I think Brissett is a better downfield passer right now than Cam Newton is. Maybe he can do a little bit more as a thrower. And then Jones is just that steady Eddie pocket passer, very good accuracy within 20 yards, gets the ball out on time, makes good decisions with the football, doesn't turn it over. A lot of the things that the Patriots really have notoriously put into the quarterback position in the past fit Mac Jones a lot, and I think they're going to look at Mac Jones as a quarterback that could be a healthier version of a guy like a Jimmy Garoppolo, you know, someone that can stay on the field for 16 games.
And would more likely be available right around where Jimmy was available.
Correct. And that's the other sort of element of it, is that to me, they have so many holes around the quarterback on offense that I still would like to see them use their top pick on a skill player. And if you can get a guy like a Mac Jones in the later part of the first round, or maybe they have 46th overall as their second round pick, maybe he sneaks in there as a top 50 guy. I think that that's a better equation of best position player available with your first pick, quarterback with your second pick, versus trying to put together a package to trade up into the top 10 to land, you know, a Trey Lance or a Zach Wilson or somebody like that. As I like those guys as prospects. Sure. But you're giving up whole lot,
Yeah, that's a
to get
rebuild
those
move.
guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And it just doesn't seem like they have they have so many holes on offense and defense that giving up 5 picks to move up to for a quarterback and just finding a solution for that one
Yeah.
problem. Well, then what do you do? Who's he throwing the
Sure.
ball to? And who's protecting him? And
That
who's
doesn't
playing
make any
defense
sense for the way the
ball?
Patriots have done business.
Right. So Jacoby Brissett, player that's played in the system before, they drafted him. They liked him back in 2016. You had him as sort of the season starter or bridge quarterback as a little bit of a potential upgrade over Cam. And then you draft a guy like the Mac Jones type in the second round, early second round, late first round. And I think that that's sort of the best way to go about it right now.
Okay, now as far as free agents, the top guy is Thuney. So, what's your guess? Is he coming back?
I don't think so. You know, he's going to demand something like $14 million.
Is he going to be the top guard in the market?
Probably. You know, Brandon Scherf, I think, is also a free
He's
agent.
old,
He's a
though.
really good. He's a really good guard too. He is older, so I think that Tooney will probably be at the top of the market. It seems like everybody sort of knew that when they franchised him this year, this was kind of like, well, why don't we just keep him around for one more season? Because we had, you know, some wiggle room with Brady leaving and stuff like that. There was nowhere else to really spend that money. So they brought Tooney back for one more year. David Andrews is also a free agent. They're starting center, who's an offensive captain as well, and he's going to be a whole lot cheaper to bring back than Joe Tooney, probably half the price. So with Shaq Mason already on the roster, Michael Onwany, who you kind of hinted at was one of those players from this last draft class, that's really started for them as a rookie, big time standout. He played mostly right tackle as a rookie, but he's sort of a natural guard fit with his size and sort of his skill set is better suited to play inside. So you let Tooney walk, you re-sign David Andrews at center, you move Onwenu inside to left guard, and you're looking at a line that's probably pretty good next year as well.
Yeah, I would. If I'll tell you right now, if I'm a team after Tooney, unless I'm like really cash strapped and he's going to be the only really prize addition to my team, to my championship team. But if I've got money and I'm going to go after Tooney, I'm going after both guys. I'm going, especially if I need a center. I'm going, if I can just spend a little bit more, I'm going to get Andrews in there. I'm going to make Tooney happy. I'm going to say, guys, package you guys together, make you guys happy, make it easier on my adjustments for my new offensive line next year. That's what I would do.
That would be a great move for another team. I think David Andrews is really the type of guy, though, he's a consummate Patriot. You know, undrafted rookie, makes the football team, carves out a role, wins a couple Super Bowls, is an offensive captain and one of the team leaders in the building, isn't going to be overly expensive. No. I don't really see why the Patriots would let David Andrews out the door. It's not like he's going to go make $12 million a year playing.
You'd have to. I would force you to overpay him, though. I would be all right. Let's see. I'll pay you more.
I hope that doesn't happen because the Patriots do not have any long-term plans besides David Andrews, and really then I would be more concerned about the shuffling on the offensive line. I think that they have guys already in-house that can fill the holes if just Tooney leaves. If you have a domino effect and you see Tooney and Andrews leave, then maybe it gets a little bit more murky. But if Andrews does leave, Ted Karras is a free agent again. He was only signed a one-year deal in Miami. Maybe they bring him back. He was okay for them in 2019 when Andrews was out with the lung issue. So maybe that's a way that they could kind of fix that. But I think Andrews is the type of guy that you keep around.
Sure.
You know, him, James White, Lawrence Guy, those are some of their key free agents and guys that belong in New England, I think, by a lot of people's standards.
Okay, so then if that does happen, if Tooney moves, and Wynn just slides in to basically take over, and if you do bring back Andrews, okay, what's the outlook now? Who's starting on the outside?
That's the big question. I think, Isaiah Wynn is probably going to be the starting left tackle on paper. Obviously, he has had a hell of a time staying healthy throughout his entire NFL career. He ended the season again on injured reserve this past year. It seems like every single year, I think besides 2019, 2018, 2020, he's ended all 2 out of his 3 years in the NFL on injured reserve. And that's definitely something that the Patriots are going to have to look for long-term. Justin Heron, who they also drafted in the 6th round out of Wake Forest, he has played extremely well down the stretch for a rookie. Onwany's sort of been the star of that class and the star of the offensive line because of how good he has played. But Heron has quietly played very well as too, and could be in line to start really at either tackle spot next year, but probably right tackle with Wynn at left tackle. And then I think that there's a very big conversation to be had about the Patriots taking another tackle at some point in the draft.
Yes.
With the success that they have had with finding offensive linemen, especially later on in the draft, and this kind of goes back to Dante Scarnecchia a little bit, and he's a great scout of these linemen in college as well. So I think that they will be able to find a guy to play right tackle for them, whether it's Heron or somebody else in the draft, without using one of their top 50 picks on one.
So do the Patriots need to add just one or two offensive linemen to this group?
I would say
to the whole group.
Yeah, I would say probably just one. I mean, they'll probably add a couple, obviously, in the draft, maybe undrafted free agency, day 3 picks, things like that.
Sure.
But with Onwenu being so versatile and having that ability to play tackle and guard, he's going to be at a high level regardless of where he plays. I just think he's a little bit of he's an A+ player at guard and probably like an A- player at tackle. So I think that his versatility and flexibility allows them to say, okay, wherever we can find it, whether it's a tackle that we feel good about or a guard we feel good about, we know we can put on Wenu wherever we want. So I think that gives them a lot of flexibility.
All right, wide receiver. Normally I would just say, oh, you definitely have to use up one of your draft picks, and then you signed a free agent. Right. But the Patriots have had zero luck with draft picks. So I'm not saying that you still shouldn't use one of your middle round guys because you could still find a good player in the middle rounds at wide receiver. But there's no question that with the money that the Patriots have right now, unless it's a quarterback situation, wide receiver could be the spot where the Patriots spend most of their money on one particular player.
It's funny because everything points to the Patriots paying a wide receiver this offseason. It's a great wide receiver free agent class. I mean, you look at the top of the free agent class at wide receiver, there's a list of 10 guys that would be better than anybody on the Patriots right now. Allen Robinson, Corey Davis, Will Fuller, Juju Smith-Schuster, Chris Godwin, Curtis Samuel. I can keep going. Yeah. There's a lot of really good names out there this offseason. That, on top of the fact that they've struggled so much in the draft with that position, on top of the fact that their offense is difficult to learn for young players, and if you bring in a player from veteran free agency, you hope that player has the in-game experience in the NFL to be able to pick it up a little bit faster and perform a little bit better early on. All those things add up to the Patriots spending at the wideout position. The issue is that Bill Belichick seldom ever does that because there are some reason and logic to it in terms of a team-building strategy that paying that wide receiver $20 million a year does not always end up being a good thing for the team in the long term, or in terms of spreading the wealth around to the entire roster. But in terms of their struggles in the draft, the fact that they have openly said that they have difficult time taking guys from college and projecting how they're going to fit into their system because the college passing game is so significantly different than the NFL passing game, especially when you get up to the expert levels like the Patriots playbook. It does scream free agent signing at you, but I don't think it will be an Allen Robinson or one of these top of market guys. The guy that I penciled in was Tim Patrick from Denver, who is that perfect kind of under the radar signing for the Patriots. I think, he's not a household name. Maybe if you play fantasy football, you've heard of him, but he's more of a guy that's probably going to be in that $8 to $10 million range, not the $18 to $20 million range with somebody like an Allen Robinson. And you're going to have it makes a lot more sense from what the Patriots have done in the past to spend $10 million on a wide receiver. Maybe they throw another $8 million at the tight end position, and you get two guys at positions that you need instead of just
tight end's a must. I mean, tight end is almost as important as wide receiver for this team. So that's why it would make a lot more sense. Like you said, you're not going to go after the big guy. You go after that second or even third level guy that's under the radar, perfect, like you said with Patrick. It's a great example. And then you can go after maybe even a Hunter Henry. I mean, I don't know how much money
Yeah.
Hunter Henry is going to command because he's always hurt.
The projections right now are very low. We're talking for Hunter Henry like $9 or $10 million a year because of his injury history.
Yeah.
His production has not been off the charts receiving wise, but he's the type of guy that Belichick loves. He's a two-way tight end is what I would call him. He can block in line with his hand in the dirt, and he can be a matchup weapon in the passing game. Although he's not necessarily a high volume guy in that Chargers offense because they have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. You bring him here, he's going to get a lot more targets. He's going to be a lot more a part of the offense. And what it would also do with Hunter Henry is it would put Devin Asiasi, who I think has shown flashes of pretty good play, it brings him down a peg, right?
Absolutely.
So it doesn't put all the pressure on Asiasi next season to be the guy. And so you have Asiasi and Hunter Henry. Now maybe you have two tight ends that can play, and you have two tight end sets come back into the equation, which the Patriots ran the fewest of this year of any team in the league. I think that that's a really good formula for them, whether it's Hunter Henry, Kyle Pitts in the draft, if they want to go that direction in the first round. Both any of those guys at the top of the free agent class or draft class, Fairmouth from Penn State's another one. Those kind of guys, pair them with a Devin Asiasi, add a Tim Patrick to the wide receiving corps, and all of a sudden you have a much improved group of weapons for whoever's playing quarterback.
And the Patriots do not have to worry about running back, right? I mean, James White's a free agent. He's 29. He's not going to go anywhere, right?
Rex Burkhead and James White are both free agents. The way that I put it is that they need to re-sign one of those guys, right? You can't let both of those guys walk because they're both very valuable sub-package pass-catching type passing down players for the Patriots. So they don't necessarily need both of them. I kind of feel like they're a little bit redundant to each other, but they definitely need one of them. And I think that would really help whoever plays quarterback next year to have that check down option with the running backs.
Who do you think that would end up being?
I think it could end up being James White. I think Burkhead could still come back too, because I don't think they're going to have to pay either one of those guys all that much to come back. And they love Burkhead. He's a 4-down player for them. He plays in the kicking game, which we know Belichick takes a lot of pride in. But James White is James White.
Oh, come on. He's a Patriot.
Yeah, you have players in the Patriots locker room that say, Damian Harris, for example, who's a second-year running back for the Patriots. I'm sure everybody's heard of him. Damian Harris said that he wants to be James White when he grows up. Like, this is that type of idol for a lot of these guys in this locker room, a mentor, a leader for a lot of those guys. And James White had a really difficult season with his family off the field. His father and mother were in a very bad car accident. His father passed away in the car accident. His mother was in critical condition for about a month afterwards. So his production and his play and his focus this year was obviously not necessarily the same as it would be because of what had happened to him off the field. So you bring back James White. You hope you get the regular James White, and he kind of is the usual guy that we're used to seeing.
All right, defensively, Jason Mccordy is 34, so he's the old dude. Starting in the secondary, of course, and he is when they're taking a look at the secondary. Of course, we started with Gilmore, so that's where everything is going to start. But then, not only is Jason Mccourty a free agent getting older, and I'm assuming if he wants to come back and play, he'll be cheap. But J.C. Jackson, we've talked about him. What did the Patriots, what did he do with J.C. Jackson?
So he's a restricted free agent, and any restricted free agent with the Patriots, they have a bunch of them over the years because of all the undrafted guys that they've got, and they always hit restricted free agency in that fourth year of their contract. And Adam Butler and Malcolm Butler and Jonathan Jones, who they signed to a contract extension eventually to play in the slot, all those guys will attest to that you are going to play on the tender for the Patriots. They'll probably place a first or a second round tender on J.C. Jackson. It will make it very difficult for a team to sign him in restricted free agency unless they want to give up a top pick to get him. And the Patriots will probably be content with paying J.C. Jackson, the $4.5 million tender next year, and then coming back to the negotiation table after 2021 to see if they can work out a long-term deal.
Jason Mccordy, any word whether he wants to come back?
So the biggest thing with Jason Mccordy and Devin Mccordy is retirement. They've at least had the conversation with each other and with their families in each of the last 2 years about retirement from the NFL. both guys are big off-field impact type guys in terms of in the community, in terms of things like Black Lives Matter and stuff like that. They're extremely active in that type in activism, honestly. So a lot of both those guys have a future in different things besides football on the horizon. And they also, on top of that, have been playing a lot of years, a lot of miles on those
Yeah.
tires as well. Especially for Devin McCourty, who's been basically a 100% snap guy for the Patriots for 10 years now. So I think that that's going to be a really something that we're going to have to monitor this offseason in New England is whether or not the McCourty twins are going to come back next year. They almost didn't come back this year. A lot of that was COVID related also, that they didn't feel 100% comfortable about playing during the COVID season, but they both contemplated or at least discussed retirement in the past. And as you know, Greg, once players start talking about the R word, usually it's not too much longer after that before they actually hang it up.
Okay, so that means the secondary, especially if Gilmore doesn't come back, it could be a big upgrade. There could be some upgrade. Well, not necessarily upgrade, but there definitely has to be some additions. What's more important, corner or safety? Well, definitely corner. If Gilmore leaves, it's definitely corner.
Right. There's a lot of what I would call long-term question marks in the secondary. If they want to bring this team back and run it back in the secondary, then they'll be great again in 2021 there. But the long-term outlook of paying Gilmore, the McCordy twins' future, J.C. Jackson's future, there is some things up in the air, and it's a bummer because a guy like Juwan Williams is supposed to be that guy that's supposed to take the mantle. Right. You know, he was the second round pick from 2019. They drafted him to be an outside corner to replace the Gilmore, to replace the J.C. Jackson, and Jason McCourty eventually down the road. He hasn't quite seized the moment yet, and I'm not sure he's going to ever blossom into that type of player that's capable of being a starting quarterback in the NFL. The safety position, I think, is the bigger one. Is they have all of those tight end stoppers. They have the Kyle Duggars. They have Juwan played a little bit in the box this year. Adrian Phillips to be that hybrid Patrick Chung type of safety that covers tight ends and plays in the box and closer to the line of scrimmage in that sort of strong safety role in Belichick's defense. The question is who's going to replace McCordy in the back end as the free safety, and who's going to play off the line of scrimmage. That one I think is a little bit more of a long-term outlook as well, but they should be looking in the draft for somebody that can play in the deep middle and can do the things that Devin does at the back end of the defense, because his time is ticking. He's not going to play forever. So that's definitely one that I think is more of like a 2 to 3 year problem, not necessarily an immediate need. But if the Patriots draft a free safety, or if they draft an outside corner with one of their early picks in the draft, then nobody should be surprised.
Now, since they spent high draft capital last year on Duggar and Jennings and Winovich in 2019,
right?
Do you think that they will now turn their attention more to the defensive line as opposed to a linebacker if they so choose to go after someone early in the draft?
Yeah, I would say that in terms of off-ball linebacker, inside linebacker, they're probably going to stay somewhat put with what they have. I think they're hoping Dante Hightower is going to come back next year and play after sitting out the season. Then you kind of cross-train a guy like a Josh Uche, who's shown some flashes certainly in his rookie season as a pass rusher. Maybe you teach him some off-ball linebacker also, and let him play inside on first down, and then you move him on to the line of scrimmage on second and third down. Something like that, I think, for either Winovich or Uche is probably in the cards. Defensive line-wise, I think that they really need a lot of help there, and a lot of help at edge rusher too. John Simon's a player that I don't think will be back. He had a really rough year, and they had a big trouble edge of the defense all season long and stopping outside runs. The defensive line is a really interesting one too, because they have right now they have a bunch of one-dimensional players. Lawrence Guy is a really good run stuffer. Adam Butler and Dietrich Wise are good pass rushers, but they don't have a lot of guys that can do it all. And so what teams have been doing this past season was they get the wrong guys stuck on the field, right? They pass with Lawrence Guy out there, and they run with Adam Butler out there, that sort of thing. So they need to find somebody that can be two-dimensional, that can do a little bit of everything for them.
Three-down guy.
a three down guy. And then on top of that, I would say they also need to find a true nose tackle as well, because they lost Danny Shelton. They tried to replace him with Bo Allen. Bo Allen didn't play it down for the Patriots this year because of an injury. Bo Allen's under contract again next year, but we're uncertain whether or not he's going to actually play. So a true nose tackle, which has been a Patriot hallmark for years, Vince Wilfork, Ted Washington, Alan Branch, that's been a position that they've really needed in that defense, because they do run a 3-4 and they do need a guy that can plug up the A gaps. Someone like that, a little bit more of a versatile piece on the defensive line would help. Probably an edge rusher that can do it all would help as well, because Uche and Winovich are kind of pass rush specialists off the edge. They don't really set the run well, so they need that strong side edge defender too. That's really where the biggest holes are, and why I would like to see them kind of stay put in the secondary for now, is because they have so many moving parts and so many new pieces to integrate in the front seven, that if you're integrating all those new pieces and using all your assets on the defensive line and edge defenders and linebackers, and then you also lose Stefan Gilmore and the McCordy twins in the back end, now we're really talking about a full-scale rebuild of this defense. So it would be nice to be able to keep the secondary intact, address the front seven issues this offseason, and then if the secondary issues come up again in the future, then they can have those assets at their disposal to go ahead and address those needs.
I know Falk is 36, but as long as he wants to come back, there's no reason to think he won't.
Correct.
And you still have the draft pick on your team, right?
Yeah, so Justin Rohrwasser is on the practice squad, as is Roberto Aguayo, who they signed towards the end of the year to the practice squad and then signed him to a futures contract. So he's now under contract with the Patriots for 2021. So that one's interesting too, because, Aguayo obviously busted with the Buccaneers, but he still has a lot of talent, and you never know, right? You never know if the player can figure it out in a different environment. So they are looking at kicker. Nick Folk, I think, will be back if he wants to be back. He said he wanted to be back a few weeks ago, that he still wants to kick. I think the Patriots would still like him to kick for them. So I don't think that one will end up being a problem. But it is interesting that they do have two young kickers on their practice squad, and I do think that they are thinking long-term in that one as well.
Okay. We talked about the coaching staff last week with Fish going off to Arizona. Anybody else? Could the Patriots lose anyone else? What kind of a coach is Jerod Mayo, as far as what kind of responsibilities does he have, and is he somebody that will more than likely hang around with the Patriots for the long run, or be plucked off the team?
I would think Jerod Mayo will be back at least for next year. He's a really interesting up-and-coming coach, though, and I know that there are some conversations about maybe not this year being his turn, but in the future, him being a head coach in the NFL. He's obviously their inside linebackers coach, which is a position he played when he played for the Patriots for almost a decade as a player. But I think the main thing that you see with Jerod Mayo is that he has learned a very good amount about pressure schemes, run fits, front seven stuff. And in a lot of ways over the last couple of years, it's sort of been Jerod Mayo has the front seven, Steve Belichick has the secondary, and that's kind of how they've pieced the whole thing together, with Bill Belichick kind of overseeing the entire operation. To me, Josh McDaniels was supposed to get an interview with the Chargers. I don't think that that's going to end up happening. He's probably going to end up staying put because nobody wants him, which is, not here nor there. But I think for a Patriots reporter, it is a little surprising to see the lack of interest even still in Josh McDaniels. It doesn't look like he's going to be going anywhere. But on the defensive side of the ball...
Is it a lack of interest over how the situation was in Indianapolis?
Maybe.
Is it a combination of them believing that, why are we wasting our time? He's never going to leave there.
I think there's a little bit of that. And I think that there's also a little bit of was it all just Brady? And was all of his success just because he had Tom Brady at quarterback? And you see the first year without Brady, and it's not a good offensive performance by the Patriots all year long. And I think the shine on Josh McDaniels is definitely wearing off a little bit in the NFL. And there you see all these young offensive coaches like a Joe Brady, for example, or Brian Daboll. Those guys are now all of a sudden the hot new names. And I think the times have sort of passed Josh McDaniels by a little bit.
I just get a kick out of how it happened. There's only 32 of these jobs, and but the owners usually stay the same. And then, yes, you have new GMs and so forth, but it's just amazing how the same philosophy of hiring head coaches. And it's like you just said, well, you didn't have Brady, and look at how the offense. Well, of course the offense is. That's like saying, oh, Arthur Smith is a great head coaching candidate now because he's got Derrick Henry. I mean, what other coordinator couldn't figure out a way to get Derrick Henry 2,000 yards?
Right.
It's just amazing how it's like Brian Schottenheimer. Jet fans hated Brian Schottenheimer. Even Seattle fans didn't really like Brian Schottenheimer. And all of a sudden, they want to open things up. You got DK Metcalf, and they can open things up. And now, the offense is as good as it's been. It's about the talent you have around you, especially with coordinators. Head coaches are a little bit different because, again, I get it. But even head coaches to that extent, like Belichick, if this was his first year, you think Patriot fans would be happy with Bill Belichick?
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great point, is that I don't think McDaniels, and I've sort of made this argument with a lot of Patriots fans this year that have questioned the coaching in New England for issues that the Patriots have really had on both sides of the ball. The coaches can only do so much, right? And the coaches, Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels, they didn't forget how to coach.
No.
Right? They didn't forget. Bill Belichick, trust us, did not forget how to coach defense in the NFL because he had a bad year this year. Similarly, Josh McDaniels didn't forget how to coach offense just because the Patriots offense struggled. It was that the talent was not there, and good players cannot overcome bad coaching, but good coaching cannot overcome bad players. So that, I think, is a big reason why the Patriots' assistants this year might not be as hot of commodities as they have been in the past, as in years past. Matt Patricia and Brian Flores, these guys come off Super Bowl wins or Super Bowl appearances, and everybody is so high on them. This year, the team struggles, and nobody's talking about any of the Patriots' assistants.
I mean, the one guy I think is the perfect poster boy is like Jim Caldwell. I mean, Jim Caldwell was the worst coach in college at Wake Forest. I mean, he was terrible. He had like probably like a 33% winning percentage. And all right, he's a nice little assistant coach. And boy, wait a second. He's going to get the head coach job with the Indianapolis Colts. But wait, who's his quarterback? It's Peyton Manning. So of course he's going to win. Of course things are going to be good when he's got Peyton Manning. And I'm not saying he's not a good coach, but it's just the whole thing. You take Peyton Manning out, and now you're just at best, all right, you're a 500 guy. You're a guy that maybe you could win 9 games here or 7 games there, or if you're lucky you get to the wild card. He's a good coach, but there's just a difference. It's just so obvious when you have great players on your team one year and then you don't have those guys the next.
Yeah, I think this year was the perfect example because the Patriots were not a 7-win football team on paper, and the coaching staff really dragged them to 7 wins, and it still wasn't enough to overcome all their personnel issues.
All right, so let's see. What would you right now give me a prediction as far as the way the Patriots are going to go here?
I think the Patriots are going to do what the Patriots always do, which is do nothing that really excites the fan base a ton. I think Hunter Henry's a realistic option at tight end. I think that a guy like a Tim Patrick, like I mentioned, or maybe a Curtis Samuel or somebody in that tier 2-3 wide receiver pool at free agency that's going to be a low cost signing. I think that's probably the most realistic option for them there.
Stefan Gilmore gone.
I think Stefan Gilmore is going to stay. I think that there's way too much value added to keeping Gilmore on the 2021 roster versus the asset that you're going to get back in a trade for him. I feel like he's such a good player.
What would you get back for him?
Maybe you get a first round,
late first round
pick if you're lucky.
If you're lucky, late first round.
He's 31 years old and he's in a contract year, so you're not only giving up the asset to acquire him, but then you also have to pay him on top of that. It doesn't seem, if he was 28, I think we'd be having a different conversation.
Yeah.
But he's not, and I don't know. I don't see it. I don't see where the team is going to fork over a very high, top 20 draft pick or something like that to go ahead and pay Stefan Gilmore $15 million a year for his age 31 through 33 season.
And it's one more year?
One more year, correct.
So you think he'll stay for one more year unless they get blown away by a trade offer?
Yeah, exactly. I think if they get blown away by a trade offer, then you obviously, as a team that's in the position that they're in, you have to pull the trigger on that sort of rebuilding move. But again, I think a lot of this that gets overlooked is that Bill Belichick is 68 years old, and he just went through an entire season where he heard that it was all Brady and that he was a beneficiary of Brady. Bill's not going to want to be 7-9 again next year. He's going to build a competitor for the immediate future. And I think that if you trade Gilmore, then you're really starting from square one.
Is Stafford the biggest offseason deal the Patriots can make that makes the most sense?
Stafford, I guess Matt Ryan potentially could make some sense. I think the one total pie in the sky pipe dream scenario is, what is Green Bay going to do at quarterback? And I don't mean Aaron Rodgers necessarily. Maybe they'd like Jordan Love. I don't know what Green Bay's plans are at that position because Aaron Rodgers is probably going to win the MVP.
And now that they've had a whole year with Jordan Love, so they know a little bit of whether or not they think they made the right move or not.
Right. So I think that's a big sort of situation to look into. If you're a Patriot fan, obviously anybody would take Aaron Rodgers in a heartbeat. Maybe it ends up being Jordan Love. That's the one that gets sold by the Packers. Obviously, you do have to monitor the situation in Dallas with Dak. I mean, he's not going anywhere, but at least you have to keep an eye on it.
Okay. And as far as the number one pick, what are the Patriots fans? What do you think they want? Quarterback?
Patriot fans probably want a wide receiver. They probably want Devontae Smith or Kyle Pitts.
Well, they're not going to get Devontae Smith. So let's get over that. He's going to be a top 5 pick. So
I would think that he's going to be a high draft pick too, but Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, obviously.
Yeah, those guys, sure. Yeah.
Where do I think that's an interesting conversation because last year we all thought that Judy, Ruggs, and Lamb were going to be gone by the first 15 picks, and it didn't shake out that way because teams picked quarterbacks. They had other needs that they filled. A receiver sliding to the Patriots at 15, whether it's Waddle, Smith, I don't think it will be Chase. One of those guys sliding to 15 is not completely out of the realm of possibilities.
That's going to be interesting. That is. I mean, obviously I got to
quarterbacks going. You got Penny Sewell, Micah Parsons in the top 10 for sure. Sometimes it's happening. I mean, last year Jerry Jeudy was picked 15 in the draft. CeeDee Lamb was 19 or something like that.
Sure.
It's not that crazy.
No, I mean, I guess one of the two, Chase or Smith. I could see. And again, there's still time because we do have to remember that this past year was just a wash for Chase. It's about the Burrow film from the year before,
right?
Not what we saw this year. Whereas Devonta Smith, I mean, we haven't seen a wide receiver who deserves the Heisman like this probably since Desmond Howard.
Yeah.
So, and it's not easy to do for a wide receiver. And if you even get close to being a Heisman winner as in college, wide receiver Heisman winner is talented. That's a guy that, and again, I'm not saying because Desmond Howard was a completely different type of player. It's a different era. But this Devonta Smith, sure. I mean, wow. I mean, I'd just be a little bit surprised if he lasted to 15. But we'll see. Because, again, there are about, 5 quarterbacks, 4 that are definitely going to be going pretty early, and then a whole bunch of different positions. So, yeah, anything can happen.
Yep.
That's what's going to be fun talking about it. So
that's what I'm counting on. Let's see Devontae Smith in the Patriots uniform. That would be fun.
Nick Caserio, do you think he's going to be gone?
No, I think Caserio is probably in the McDaniels pool at this point of guys that are sort of just waiting out Belichick at this point. I think there's a better chance of somebody, Monty Eisenfort's in Tennessee now, director of player personnel with the Titans. Him getting a general manager job as a Patriot general manager tree, coaching tree, whatever you want to call it, is probably more likely. I think Caserio, similar to McDaniels, has turned down so many jobs in the past at this point to stay in New England that I don't know if anybody wants to, assume that he's going to leave.
Okay. And have you heard anything as far as coaching rumors or anything like that yourself?
Not much. McDaniels' camp, I can tell you, really thought that he was going to get a chance with the Chargers.
Really?
And they haven't called him yet from any of the reports out there. We see all of these coaching interviews are starting to roll out now. That was the one place where I think the Patriots could have lost McDaniels to, and so far it's been quiet on that front. And I think that is a surprise to people inside Josh McDaniels' camp.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised too because the Chargers, they don't exactly do things normal. It's one of those franchises that you could see, oh, we don't care what happened in Indianapolis. This is different.
Right.
Telesco, though, that's the deal. I mean, he's had some success, obviously, when you draft Herbert. That's going to buy you another year or two. But I don't know if Telesco's actually done all that great of it. If Telesco didn't, let's just put it this way. If Telesco didn't draft Herbert, I don't even think he'd be there anymore because he's been there long
Yeah.
enough and nothing's changed.
That's another big part of it too, is that I know McDaniels wants at least some control of the roster, but they already have a GM in
Yep.
place and with
Yep.
the Chargers. And I think similarly, like to a place like Houston would maybe interest McDaniels, but do you really want to go into that house of cards with Jack Easterby and those guys there in Houston? And you're not going to have a ton of power with Cal McNair. It's definitely a situation where McDaniels wants a lot of power. I don't think he necessarily wants carte blanche over the roster, but I think he wants probably final say on the 53-man roster. And I don't know if any of those organizations are going to give it to him.
I mean, it would make a lot of sense if Caserio actually did go somewhere.
It would make a lot of sense. And I think that they're in a position now with Caserio that I feel like Belichick overrides him so much in the draft at this point.
Uh-huh.
It must just sort of get frustrating.
Sure, yeah.
Right? Like you put in all this work and during the college football season, Nick Caserio and his staff, and then Bill comes in February, parachutes into the Senior Bowl and says, "We're taking Duggar, Jennings, and Uche. We're done. Let's go."
Sure.
Right? And there's got to be some frustration there. I can't imagine, and I could be totally wrong, but I can't imagine if you put Nick Caserio's board up against what the Patriots have actually done in the draft over the last couple of years that they would totally match.
I'd like to see it.
Something tells me that Nick Caserio did not like N'Keal Harry as much as Bill Belichick liked N'Keal Harry.
Well, that'd be, I mean, that would be the first thing. It would be if Caserio actually did get, because he is going to interview for the Houston job, right? So if he does get a job, that would be very interesting to find out whether or not, okay, wouldn't that be the perfect place for Josh McDaniels to go then? If there's an opening.
If there's a pairing, if there's a McDaniels, Caserio pairing somewhere, then I think that definitely makes the most sense. But again, I think what it comes down to is whether or not the sort of aura of hiring from the Patriot tree has sort of worn off at this point.
All right, well, we'll find out. Evan, great job all season. It was a lot of fun talking Patriot football with you. No playoffs, but that's okay because that means we're going to have a much more enjoyable time once the offseason begins. So I'll talk to you sometime right after the Super Bowl before free agency kicks off, and I look forward to having a lot of really fun conversations with you within the next few months.
Absolutely, Greg. Thanks for having me on all season. It's been a lot of fun and a pleasure of mine.
You got it. Thanks, Evan. We'll talk to you soon.